play right, cause they can't miss. All about the game, that's a cold switch. Serving up the truth, call it ruthless. Tune in and get your fix from Blake and Vish Sports.
We're going to talk about a player that here at Blake and Vish Sports, maybe we were little less high on during the consensus before the draft, and that is Ja'Marr Chase. He's had kind of a rocky camp. There's been some reports about his inability to get separation. Those reports have also been refuted by others who say he's had a great camp, and he's come into this preseason, and a lot of people already started writing him off because he's been dropping the ball like nobody else in this preseason. I mean, it feels like he dropped the one pass Joe Burrow threw on a little bubble screen. That was a little disappointing. So, Blake, I'm just going to kick it over to you. Should the Bengals be worried about Ja'Marr Chase's issues with drops?
I'd say in the overall, no. Clearly, the guy hasn't played in 2 years. It could just be the yips or whatever, and that's what I think it is. I just had two main takeaways. So the first one was the ball he dropped in the most recent game. You mentioned it. First play of the game, I want to say. Bubble screen to him. Maybe this was supposed to be like, in my mind, this was pass. This was the play that's a confidence booster. Get him in space. He's amazing after the catch, right? He's maybe not the best in the world or the best even in his class, but he's really good. He's a big dude, fast, strong, all of that. This was supposed to be the play that, builds his confidence. He can, get the ball on a run, nothing too difficult. He's already separated, all of that, and he drops it. And that to me is just like, that just is even more confidence killer right there. So that was tough. And you mentioned the reports in camp too. I think the week leading up to this past game, the main thing I saw was fantastic week of camp for Ja'Marr Chase. So you're thinking, all right, he's going to, flip the switch. He's got it now. And then just the drop. It was tough. I think in the overall, though, my takeaway was that it seems like a lot of the guys that took this past year off have really maybe been a little rusty or not as hyped up as they are, not showed in at least the preseason, which, again, just to say it is meaningless, of course, but you'd want to get somewhat of a taste. They have struggled a little bit, and there's a few guys. Penei Sewell, who was very highly touted by both me and you, we were really high on him. He's struggled for the Lions. Ja'Marr Chase in the games, he's had drops. Trey Lance, even, out of all the rookie quarterbacks, I wouldn't say he's performed like one of the best three. You could say he's been the fourth, maybe the third. I'd even argue that's a stretch, but there's been, I guess, inconsistencies or a little rust from all three of those guys. They're all top 10 picks, all highly touted, and they all skipped the previous year. So I guess that was my main takeaway in how it seemed like those guys or those type of guys who did sit out the prior year have been struggling in this preseason. And maybe that is the cobwebs of not playing a whole year and playing competitive football. But that is something that I found really interesting.
Yeah, so to first start off with his drops, because I more or less agree with just about everything you said. I don't think his drops specifically are a concern at all. I have other problems and other things that concern me about Ja'Marr Chase, but those things concerned me when he came out of LSU. His hands, they were never a concern when he came out of LSU.
Yeah.
He had maybe the best hands in the draft, him or Devonta Smith. He had unbelievably strong hands at the catch point. He has unbelievable hand-eye coordination to maintain his keep his eyes on the ball through contact. He has unbelievable strength at the catch point. To me, it's just, like you mentioned, he might just be pressing a little bit because he hasn't played football in so long. He's just amped up to play, and he's just dropping passes. His hands are excellent. I don't expect his hands or drops to be a continued issue for Ja'Marr Chase. Now, you talked about the other aspect of the players who have maybe not played a year being a little more inconsistent throughout this preseason, and then in comparison to the guys who played last year. I mean, Lance, right, he's had moments where he's looked unbelievable, and he's also had moments that have been less than, and a lot of it could be just the fact that, he's rusty. He hasn't had game experience in a while prior to this. Ja'Marr Chase, similar type of thing. Penei Sewell, it's been a rough go in preseason, especially at right tackle. I mean, his third play of the entire preseason, Gregory Rousseau beat him for a sack, and Greg Rousseau didn't do much else in that game, but he beat him for a sack. And so it's been consistent from that standpoint. But honestly, So I'm with you in regards to these guys might just be rusty, and that's really what's holding them back. But in regards to Jamar Chase, I do think there's other aspects to be concerned. I think that that report about separation, I'm not shocked by that. When I watched him in college, that was the biggest reason why I thought Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle were the two best receivers in this draft. I didn't think Jamar Chase created space or separation, and I didn't think he won consistently and quickly enough off the line of scrimmage. I thought too many times it would be him in the corner, hand fighting up and down the field, and he might out muscle the corner at the catch point, and it's unbelievable that he did that. And his stats for a 19-year-old were truly phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I felt that it also helped. Joe Burrow's ball placement helped him a lot, and I just felt like the ways he won were also ways he could get beat. Like you go back to, I always bring up this game when I talk about Jamar Chase because it's maybe the game that really, I mean, everybody already knew Jamar Chase was a superstar. He won the Blickenden-Toff Award, but that game against AJ Terrell in the national championship game, yes, he baptized AJ Terrell at the catch point multiple times in that game. But AJ Terrell also won quite a few reps against Jamar Chase in that game. It just so happens that, he had a few bad plays at the catch point. Jamar Chase is a really, really talented player. And when I saw AJ Terrell, who was a top 20 pick at corner, doing that, it's a little bit concerning because elite wide receiver talents, guys that you draft in the top 5 of the draft, are not the people that get beat like that by good corners. Like, I mean, the pushback really from both of us was obviously we had him as the third best receiver, which is not really much of a it's not a bad thing because Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and himself were all really, really talented. Our real pushback was that we felt he wasn't generational. And to me, the generational tag, the elite tag, the kind of tag that you use to draft a receiver in the top 5, you have to be an AJ Green type. You have to be Julio Jones, Amari Cooper, Sammy Watkins, the kind of guys. Well, all of their NFL careers have not turned out the way they expected. But when they came out of college, they had the production Jamar Chase had. They had the consistency in terms of winning, and they were all elite level athletes. I question Jamar Chase's overall down the field speed and burst just a little bit. I know he ran 4.38. To me, he looks more 4.45 than 4.38. And I also do just question his ability in terms of just how he consistently wins. I think just physicality is not sustainable in my personal opinion.
And I think you kind of said it best. Like, he was known for being the guy that can make catches in traffic, the guy that can bully corners at the point of attack, which is a really good skill to have. I mean, if you remember, that's what Dez was the best at. Dez was amazing at doing that. Now, Dez was also, he had a bigger wingspan.
Catch radius.
Yeah. So that also, you would think that the one thing he would be best at is, when he is going across the middle, is coming in with the ball, because he was so good at that at LSU. I think it's more of a surprise than anything. And, we're not saying he's a bust. Like, we're obviously not trying to insinuate that because he's had a few drops. It's just more of the fact that when you do take a receiver number 5, you kind of hope they can hit the ground running, as that's a position that really seems to, at least in recent years, been something that transfers really easily. I mean, you think of the successes, even last year's rookie class with Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Ayuk, Claypool, Jerry Jeudy had some success as well. There's a ton of other guys. That's only last year too, and the other years even better. So when you see a position that does usually easily transfer and he's struggling out the gate, it could be a concern. I think my bottom line is that it is interesting seeing these guys who missed last year, Sewell, Chase, and who was the other guy we said? Lance. They've had pretty inconsistent moments, which I think is my main takeaway from that. And it's changed the whole scouting from last year. I mean, just one example. Do you remember Wade, the cornerback from Ohio State, nickel? If he wouldn't have played last year, he would have been a first or second round pick, and he moved to the outside. And
you think so?
He was touted as a first round pick.
To me, he was like Matt Barkley getting touted as a first round pick. He wasn't really talented enough to be a first round pick. People just said he was a first round pick. I mean, how many nickels that played?
He would have been a top 50 pick, I'd imagine. The way he was being talked
about. He was touted that way. I'm not sure if he would have ended up going
Fair
there
enough. Yeah,
personally. That's my guess because he did play in a loaded secondary with 2 first-round picks in Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett.
that does help. Yeah.
Yeah. But going back to Chase, right? And I want to reiterate the point that you mentioned about how he's definitely not a bust, right? Like, there's no way of saying that right now. Nobody knows that, right? And catching the football is one of the best things he does. He doesn't drop the football. He
Mhm.
didn't drop it at LSU, and he has really strong hands. And you brought up the Des Bryant comparison, so like you would expect that because it's something he's naturally done so well in the other
Mhm.
few times we've seen him. You would expect that to naturally just get better organically. You wouldn't have much worry about that. To me, the separation issue, that to me,
That's
going
a
back to that,
yeah.
is a worry. And it's a secondary issue in its own sense because his play style is really important. And you brought up the comparison of Des Bryant. And that Des Bryant comparison is really important because there's a next gen stats has this kind of graph. And do you know that there's a linear relationship between tight window catch rate and arm length, right?
Yeah,
Linear
that makes
relationship.
yeah.
Yeah, it makes perfect
I
sense,
saw
right?
that
The
dart on
longer
Twitter
arms,
circulating
right?
on
The
Twitter.
longer arms you have, the better you are in tight window catch rate. You brought up Des Bryant. Des Bryant is 6'3", 220, and has 34-inch arms.
Yeah.
Jamar Chase is 6 foot, 200 pounds, and has 30-inch arms. That's where the concerns to me, if Jamar Chase isn't separating, become a little bit more real when you draft a receiver number 5 overall. His hands to me should not be an issue. Nobody should worry about it. I have no questions about his hands, and I think that they'll be fine.
Mhm. Yeah. It's just been one of those things this camp that has just been really strange. Like this, of all the things we've read, we talked about the separation. That was a concern, before he was drafted. And now seeing him play, the last thing you would think he would be struggling with is actually catching the ball, which is just, I guess, where there could be cause for concern for some people.
Definitely, definitely. So overall, both of us feel honestly there should be real no concern with Jamar Chase and the drops. There might
Hmm.
be other reasons to be concerned with Jamar Chase, but those are reasons that we both felt should have been points of concern before the draft itself.
Yep.
Moving on to the topic that